Mike Norman is at it again, and it just seems that he holds all this resentment towards Peter Schiff, and I don't know why someone would be so angry at one individual. Peter Schiff, you have to remember, was right in 2006, 2007, while Mike Norman was wrong. And you could see the jealousy within Mike Norman's videos over time, and the way that he acts is quite childish. Just like some of his fans, you could see some of the videos they do in the comment section, they act like they're immature high schoolers. But putting that aside, you have to look at the fact some of his arguments. He said that a firm like Walmart could be able to afford a $15 an hour minimum wage because A, they could access the capital markets. They have the ability to do so. Okay, so let's say a minimum wage is enacted at $15 an hour. What would be the logical thing that firms would do? Simple. They would move the jobs overseas. There's no doubt about that, because you start to raise the cost of capital, guess what? What are you going to do to try to avert that, or to try to get around that? A, send jobs overseas, or B, raise prices. This is what Peter Schiff was trying to mention. And let's just look at some of the comments in my last video. I really like this comment by Ed the Water Guy, and he talks about the minimum wage. He says, to add another point, if for example a business can only afford to spend $50 an hour on help and minimum wage goes to say $15 an hour, then there will be 3 workers who will have to do the job of what 5 at $10 an hour used to do. So in this example, it sounds great for the 3 who are fortunate to have higher paying jobs, but what you don't see is that they're going to have to work nearly twice as hard, because now they have to pick up the slack to make up for the 2 workers who are now unemployed. Move the minimum wage to $50 an hour, you could be certain that the business will fail with only 1 employee when this business needs more productivity than 1 worker can possibly accomplish. He's exactly right. He says that 2 people would be out of work because of this. And it would actually hurt a lot of these smaller firms, right? Big firms, what they could do is they could just outsource their jobs, and they could take care of that situation really easily. And now we should look at someone who has the same type of philosophy as Mike Norman. It's Paul Krugman. And the headline, this is off the Economic Policy Journal, caught. Krugman knows what happens when the minimum wage is raised. Paul Krugman's recent call to raise the minimum wage is consistent with much of his liberal political writings over the past decade. But raising the minimum wage is not consistent with Krugman's writing as an economist. Those who care about the poor should pay more attention to the Krugman the economist than to Krugman the liberal pundit. Krugman uses the Christmas shopping season and the fact that 60% of minimum wage workers are in sales or food services to talk about the decline in the real wages of people working in retail. His solution to the problems: we can raise the minimum wage. But before we embrace the policy prescription of Krugman the pundit, let's ask the opinion of Krugman the economist. 1998 review of a book on living wages, he wrote, "So what are the effects of increasing minimum wages? Any Econ 101 student can tell you the answer. The higher minimum wage reduces the quantity of labor demand and hence leads to unemployment. This is simple economics, and Paul Krugman, the economist, makes more sense than Paul Krugman, the New York Times writer." And then Krugman writes again, he authors in Econ 101 textbook, the 2008 edition clearly states when the minimum wage is above the equilibrium rate, some people who are willing to work, that is, sell labor, cannot find buyers, that is, employers willing to give them jobs. There you go. You raise the minimum wage, guess what? You're going to have less employees. And those that are unemployed, well, that's going to be much, much, much higher. And when we have Mike Norman and Paul Krugman, the liberal pundit, right? These are basically European socialist model policies, which has actually decimated countries like Europe. You have more and more government, guess what? You're going to screw over the middle class. Just like we have over the last 100 years, right? With the Federal Reserve System, with more rules, regulations, it's actually screwed the middle class over. So now begs the question, why is there so much hate on Peter Schiff? I see these comments, oh, because he talks about gold, he's a gold seller. Well, he may do that because A, he's an entrepreneur, and B, he's a proponent of the Austrian School of Economics. He's a long-term thinker. So his timing has obviously been off, right? He's been wrong since 2011, but he correctly called the tech bubble the real estate bubble, and then, yeah, he hasn't gotten it perfect. And then we get Mike Norman totally criticizing his record, and it just seems that he is a jealous individual. I mean, you could look at the videos Norman did in 2009. I could just link them below, and you could check for yourself. And then in an interview that he did with Lauren Lister of RT, and a debate with Carl Denninger versus Norman, Mike Norman acted childish. He acted like a little kid. And we see some of, like I said before, some of his subscribers and people who share his viewpoint, they act in an irrational fashion, just like Norman. They do videos on Schiff or guys like Schiff. And they're much older than me, and they act like they're in high school again. It's pretty compelling to see old people act immature. But putting that aside, what's Peter Schiff's message? Is that, guess what? If you have an economy based on Say's law, and those that don't understand Say's law, basically supply creates demand. And in order to have that situation, you need to have lower taxes, less rules and regulations, so we could turn our economy from a economy based on not savings, but from consumptions to savings. That's what made America prosperous, by having an economy based on savings. You have that, you will have a manufacturing revolution. Manufacturing jobs will pay much, much more than these retail jobs. And besides that, when you manufacture goods, the economy becomes much more richer. Once we started to have a trade deficit since the late 1960s, early 1970s, we have gone down the tubes. And add in central banking, all this money printing, guess what? Wages are going to go down. It's going to take two incomes to raise a family. But when you try to explain this to a leftist, they're going to sneer at you. They're going to name call you, just like they're doing to Peter Schiff, and they're leaving death threats for him. How sad is that? That they're leaving death threats for this guy, just because he came up with a logical reason on why the minimum wage is actually going to screw people over in the long run. Anyways, those are my thoughts on that, guys. Leave your thoughts, comments below, and I'll talk to you another time, guys. Thanks a lot. Bye.